Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month is September, and creating hope through action is the World Suicide Prevention's theme. September 10th is the day for that. And another thing I want to also share is that restoring every aspect of life, National Recovery Month is September also. It's emphasizing recovery, substance use, and mental health challenges to improvement in health, home, community, and purpose. I want to share like a story, short story. Probably heard it before in different variations. The story of the glass milk, and it kind of segues and bring in our new guest. A very poor boy struggled to find food and attend school. Became extremely hungry. He went to a nearby neighbor and asked a young girl for a glass of water. The young girl saw that he was very hungry and gave him a large glass of milk. The boy was surprised and grateful. Later, that boy became a successful doctor, and he treated the young woman. And the woman was the same girl from those years ago that he received the milk. When she was eventually billed her treatment, the doctor recognized her from the past and wrote the bill was paid full with milk. I thought that was a sweet story because, when you think about community, think about the challenges when you think about these, when we talk about these topics, it reminds us the human element of it all. Today, we have a new guest. Her name is Jill. We've been trying to get you on here before, but such an honor for you to come on and just share your insight with us today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that the times finally kind of met together. And I think it's appropriate for this month's theme, so this works.
Yeah, so just wanted to give a small disclaimer for those who are listening in the States. 90 Days, the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. If you are having thoughts or plans that harm yourself or just don't feel safe, I encourage you to get professional help. If you're not sure what to do, just talk to a colleague, church member, whoever it is, whether you're in a mosque, temple, whoever you feel safe enough as an adult to say, I need help. Start there. And I just want to encourage that. Also, I'm sharing a link. It's going to be in the notes. This on the Revive Ministry web page. We have a list of the helplines around the world because I know other people listen to this, and I encourage you, whatever resource, if you are struggling, I encourage you to get the help. And with that said, thank you again for coming on. I always say that people have said it better than me, so I start with a quote and we'll just go from there, if that's okay. I remember in school I used to have read Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain. I love what he says here. It's very simple, but very, I think a man cannot be comfortable without his own approval. We start there. We're talking about one more day. I didn't mention that before, but that is the theme for this month for a couple years now for Revive Ministries, because I just feel sometimes that's all we need sometimes when it comes to these moments when we're really struggling. So when you hear this quote, what comes to mind, Jill?
Well, I think coming from a PTSD/suicidal background, there was a lot of shame, a lot of inner hatred, a lot of not feeling good enough or feeling too much. Most of my story can be quickly summarized, if one were to do so, by myself simply not approving of who I was, primarily because of layers of trauma that I could not see who I was through those layers. So very appropriate quote.
Yeah, it's a lot of times I'm with clients that work in the mental health field, and I ask the question, are you allowed to get better? Are you allowed to heal? It's kind of weird and very direct. Sometimes I take offense. Of course I'm allowed, but a lot of times there's so many there's one comedian, John Mulaney. He said it funny. It's like he was the mayor of nothing. I feel a lot of times we can be that way for everything. And it's harder with mental health. There's this underlying over explaining, and it's never do we feel that way for other things. When it's physical or something more accepted, we're like, oh, I just need to go to the doctor and everything's kind of more. But if you're struggling this way, it's like, well, I need to over explain why I have to take all these steps because in essence, it's you're trying to, I guess, a self bargain. So I do feel that that's a little bit harder to see. I want to get your input on like what else has been hard, struggling with people struggling, what you've seen or you experienced struggling with substance use or mental health challenges, to feel worthy to get better. Like that question sounds weird because like a lot of us maybe have pride. We're like, well, of course I'm worthy, but the steps, the boundaries, the barriers we put up. So what comes to mind, Joe?
Well, for your audience, I tend to follow IFS, internal family systems. And
Mm,
so that's just basically a way of practicing mental health assistance that I will completely butcher because I understand it at a level 100, but I use it all the time in terms of different parts of myself, usually different ages, because my childhood was littered with abuse. And one of the things that I notice when I'm working with people is that the adult sitting in front of me wants to heal.
mm-hmm,
The inner child that is probably controlling a huge portion of that adult's behavior isn't quite so sure because that child has developed a whole bunch of coping mechanisms. And if you heal me and I don't have these coping mechanisms, how do I survive? I know
mm,
from a personal perspective, that's what I went through. And I see that a lot when you see people resisting healing. I think it's I think one of the questions to for a practitioner or a therapist is to start to wonder what part or what age is actually drawing that kind of conclusion, because it's probably not the adult sitting right in front of you. My
mm-hmm.
therapist has the best line. She said, "We're all children wrapped up in layers that look like adults." So that's kind of the way I approach it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's 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 fascinating the level of self talk. Both we're for the familiar doesn't have to be good. It's just familiar. It could be something
Yes.
that we just want to. It's change is scary. And we could convince ourselves to do anything or nothing. I kind of have this. But I kind of try to. It's hard nowadays, but I try to say I treat the person and then what they're going through. Like, so I serve the person first, and then I treat what they're going through. Sometimes we try to do it reverse, and it doesn't really go very well. But you're right. I do feel um, there is that kind of conflict within. I think Carl Jung, I always was, I was just taken back of all the verbiage Carl Jung uses, but I feel he had to name it something. So I felt it was very, but when you actually read deep, I like this quote. He says, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." There's something inside that really is stuck, and sometimes it's a lot of times I kind of, for my experience, was just trying to get derivative of what I was experiencing and not turn away. It's hard, the mirror effect. Like you don't want to see this part of you, and we have, like you said, so
You
many.
don't want to feel this part of you.
Yeah, yes,
That's
yes.
what you don't want to feel it.
I don't want to feel it. I don't want to
Yeah.
feel it, and on top of that, like we describing all the stigma and all the shame, it's almost like overwhelming. We're just trying to climb a mountain, but instead we're carrying it too. There's a quote later on like that. It's almost like, well, it's not surprising that sometimes we don't want to heal, in a weird way, you know.
Oh, 1,000%. It's very, very scary. I mean, I came to MDMA therapy for PTSD
Hmm.
primarily because I was suicidal. I think I was a few months from making a very, very bad decision. And even signing on and saying, yes, I'm going to do this because I can't figure out any other way, traditional talk therapy, which is awesome,
Hmm.
and an antidepressant. Like the traditional ways of dealing with it weren't working. So I signed on the dotted line. Yes, I'm going to do this. And even with that said, massive amounts of resistance. To this day, I still have resistance to healing. It is our
Hmm.
own internal strategies to survive that might be misinformed and misaligned for our happiness, But from their perspective, that's what made us survive. So healing them, it's very, very natural to have a lot of resistance about it. In my opinion, at least that's what I experience. Pretty
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah, and I feel like even though with all the trauma therapy I've been through and, attempting suicide myself and then being able to be alive, it was like, and it's jarring to just remember briefly, not to get into it. Like when you go through trauma, at least from my experience, I could talk about it now. It still feels, but it's dulled. Like before, like whenever the intensity was higher. But really, I took a bunch of pills and I thought, okay, it wasn't working. So I went out for a walk and I went to the wrong room. That's the only reason the EMS called. And that's why I'm alive here. That's why I'm talking. And that was like way back. So, my stomach was pumped. And I remember it was considered an accidental overdose, but I knew it was a suicide and I had nothing. So it was back in the time when, like, you pull yourself on the bootstraps, 9/11, all that stuff. I was in the military. No one really knew. No one really cared. But that was the internal dialogue, I would say, for so long. But it wasn't really real. It was just something that was, and it took years. It's like you're describing, decades, I would say, to kind of not gravitate to that persona, gravitate to that kind of character, that person who is that black sheep, that person that can't relate, that person that shouldn't be here in the priorness when I was really that down, when I actually did the attempt. But therapy does a wonderful thing, but it takes a long time. You don't see the progress after so many years. But it's that mindfulness approach that I had to remember that not to look at judgment of it and like try to work piece by piece. And it's not there's no short way through it, at least from my experience. It's kind of this long like road of self-discovery, and that's how. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that's why you have me on your podcast. Because psychedelic assisted psychotherapy compared to traditional talk therapy, which I am still in, I still have a therapeutic relationship with my therapist. The analogy I like to make is talk therapy is the horse and buggy on the unpaved road, whereas psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is the sports car on the highway. You still have to travel it. You still have to be willing to drive it. For me to no longer qualify, specifically in the suicidal thoughts, in the hypervigilance thoughts, in the rumination thoughts, for me to no longer qualify for the PTSD diagnosis within 1 year, I would never have made that progress as quickly with traditional talk therapy. But it did take a year. So one of the things that I think happens is that as people are seeing psychedelics in the news, they're kind of thinking, oh, it's like Western medicine, it's a pill and you're better. No, it's just with the speed of the healing also comes the speed of feeling all those feelings. And for a year, I felt pretty awful as I was going through the healing. So it is an interesting, you still need therapy, you still need integration. It can be sped up if you're willing to do the work, is what I'm finding. I'm finding a lot of people not willing to do the work. And then there's other people like, I'm going to nose to the grindstone. I'm really going to work on this. And they're the ones that make progress much quicker than just traditional therapy, which I love traditional therapy. Again, I still have my relationship with my therapist.
Yeah, I think it's I feel when you dive deeper and you're like, what about your own self, your own, a lot of times we forget who we are. We don't take the time to kind of self-discover. It's not one size fits all. I know a lot of people who are really struggling and, with TBI and they have trauma and all this stuff. It doesn't work the same way. So whenever I'm with a client, I'm working in the field, I just want them to think. Like, I want them to think about options. I want them to be the one leading. The last thing I want to do is tell someone to do something And even if they feel like, oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
this is really about them self-discovering what works for them. So for me, I feel like whatever, like that's one thing I love about. We're gonna segue. We're gonna go into more about what brought you to where you are today. But that's what I love about Revive Ministries. What I'm trying to do is just to open the platform for people to share what has worked for them. I'm not saying that it's going to work for everyone, but it may work for you. Maybe parts of it. At the same time, having that openness, not that closed mind. And I feel that in itself leads to better understanding of oneself, better understanding of one's needs. And I don't know. I just feel that's a more, I would say, appropriate and hopefully a contagious way of kind of looking at health. And mental health is usually looked at mental illness. We look at maintaining it. I just like to focus on the health part. Let's talk about like how can we be better versions. So we don't, the imperfections. Where if someone was born with a birth defect, do we say that their value is like they just have to live differently? Like people with mental health issues just have to find ways to live differently. Doesn't mean that their life is over. That's how I feel in regards to this. So I don't like the maintaining mental health. I would like the kind of growing and becoming. It's an ongoing thing. So with that being said, I like to have my guests kind of share a little bit about themselves. Obviously, you're new to the podcast. Anything that you want to share that brought you to, you mentioned a little bit just prior. Just the floor is yours. Thank you. Sorry, I segued real quickly.
So MDMA therapy for PTSD was supposed to be FDA approved last August. It was delayed for a variety of reasons. As a matter of fact, Lykos's response letter to the FDA was just published today, and I have to dive into it. And there were some concerns about the way the trials were run. Running a clinical trial with a psychedelic is extremely challenging because of blinding and things of that sort. The reason why I talk about MDMA therapy for PTSD is because I went through it. I went through it underground. I was not part of a clinical trial. I went through it in my late 40s. I had lost my partner of more than 20 years. I had a massive panic attack that wouldn't go away. I always knew I had a bad childhood. I had no understanding of trauma. I had no understanding of my body being hijacked. And the therapist with whom I had worked with my partner's grief started seeing me again. We were talking. I was on Wellbutrin, and I was getting worse. And so that's one of the reasons why your podcast stood out to me, because you talk about suicidal tendencies. And that's what ultimately led me to say yes to my therapist, who was working to be a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. And I said yes. I looked at the clinical research, which at the time there were 2 clinical trials, and I was pretty desperate. And so one of the reasons why I share my story and I talk about this therapy, and with the hopes that soon it'll be FDA approved, it's already approved in Australia, is that I didn't see any other way out. And just like you said, certain modalities work for certain people and for certain traumas and things of that sort. And I'm really looking forward to this modality being added to the mental health buffet that will be available to people. It is, the VA is running their own research. You're starting to see people interested in other psychedelics, like Texas, very interested in ibogaine because of the opioid crisis. So we're starting to see more of an uptick. And I just like to share my patient experience so people understand it's not overnight. It's very zippy. You have to be willing to re-feel and go back to some of those awful memories and awful feelings, or else it's not going to work. And I just don't want marketing to kind of take over and say, oh, don't worry, it's 10 years of therapy in 8 hours. It can be if you do the work. So that's why I'm really thrilled that people like you let me on their podcast so I can advocate for the therapy and also explain it from a patient perspective.
I think the pursuit to find more options, because when it comes to mental health crisis, I'll just say it's not improving. There's people in some senses. I just want people to know that they're not helpless. There's options out there. Granted, and I feel that that's all we can do in regards to just in promoting that. I always kind of emphasize, I don't like the old way of thinking that things are just static. People are not static. There's things that they can do that can improve, and success is really defined by the individual themselves. What if success is just being moderately successful? Why does it have to be these big things? And that has a lot to do with trends with social media and how people are seeing and communicating or not communicating. But I do feel that if we could slow it down and just, I want people to know that not just it's okay to not be okay, but there's options out there. Not to get in the weeds of it, but I feel we're whenever there's an idea, there's always just fear of what that may entail, and I just feel right now there hasn't been a real answer to each time. I never feel I run out of work. I'll put it that way. I'm at work, absolutely. And it's like it seems like things are getting harder. But one thing I noticed is that communication is getting worse. Like family dynamics are getting worse. It's harder to, and the resources are, dare I say, limited. And like I feel anything, all hands on deck. Like if this does help people, I haven't myself known anyone who's been through them. That what is it called? I'm sorry, I'm the one to butcher it.
MDMA therapy for MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD.
Yeah, I have never heard of that. Like I haven't heard anyone gone through it like in person.
That's why I talk about it.
Yeah,
exactly. Because you have a lot of underground folks who will serve MDMA and not have any trauma understanding of what's actually needed. And if MDMA by itself healed trauma, MDMA's street name is ecstasy. Every single college student would not have any trauma. It's the psychedelic plus the therapeutic intervention that is what produces results. And I think that's so important for people to understand.
Yes. And those who are listening, those who are watching, I would encourage you to check out. There'll be notes about ways to find out more about this. I appreciate what you're doing. You're spearheading. Sometimes, whenever there's something new, it's always kind of cross-examined. There's a lot
of much pushback. Yes,
and
it's drugs, and I'm like, well, what do you think SSRIs are?
yeah, I know, and I just feel, for me, when I'm on the ground and I'm actually seeing the families that are impacted, the people who are really struggling, and they've been through so many different medications, different treatments. If anything can work, I think it can be worked safely, and that's what you got. Everything's trying to be done. It's not like anyone's trying to cut corners. But what I don't like, I agree with you. I don't want the pitch. How marketing goes. I don't want the pitch to be like, okay, it's gonna be like 8 hours. You're gonna cut down all the. It's about the work you put into it. That's basically it. Just when I've been through EMDR therapy for trauma, and it's a slower, but it does the whole thing is I have to experience that whole thing, and it's controlled. And I've been in talk therapy, and my therapist is really great, and we have that good relationship, so it does work. But I have to put the work into it. I can't just be sitting there just assuming, okay, and that's
I mean, EMDR, to give folks a context, EMDR for me managed to take away. My father beat me brutally at one specific instance. I had nightmares about it for years. EMDR helped remove the fear of that memory, and then additional talk therapy helped me through the trauma of it. Like I think EMDR is a phenomenal tool, depending on what you're working on, to calm the nervous system. If additional work needs to get done, it's a great beginning. I've seen EMDR work beautifully with like folks in car accidents, because it takes away the fear of that particular situation. And that's a great example of that should be on the buffet of assistance for people as they're being diagnosed, as their physicality is being evaluated and their goals are being evaluated. It's a phenomenal tool.
Yes, and I do, like I done the EMDR in tandem with talk therapy, and it has helped because those feelings get stuck. They don't go anywhere. And like sometimes it affects a lot of different aspects, your relationships, how you view
Yeah.
things. It can really be disruptive. And being a person with mental health issues and ongoing, it is nice to have options. Especially um you know I understand some of the medication as much as they have all these side effects. At one point I really needed them, but for one, I'm not one who wants that. I don't think the magic pill is really the point. The point is getting, finding wholeness from where I was broken. Like whatever happened, it's not to this, not, there's going to be work, at least from my experience being a person on the other side of the table and the one working with people now. It's really about putting the work in there, and it's not about
And to just clarify for people what the work is, the work is experiencing either in your body, the sensation at the time, the body, the issues in the tissues, experiencing the emotion, maybe going back to the memory, and all of that can be incredibly disruptive on your own. For me, I need a partner in crime. That's what my therapist is. As much as I already know the skills and I use the skills with other people, doing it myself, I kind of need that guiding hand. And I think that's really important for people to understand. If you're feeling dysregulated in your body, if your thoughts are racing, or whatever the symptom is with you, the work is going towards that. What we tend to do, my friends, me, before I was in before this therapy in my late 40s, I just squashed that down. I just put that away. I just kept functioning. And so I think it's important people understand what we mean when we mean the work. It's going towards the painful, uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah. And, I think that journey, and that's when I say it's the long route, but when I really mean it's the route where a lot of us try to turn away.
Yeah.
We go through something, there's a lot of, comforting and like understandably, but a lot of the healing comes from going towards it. Obviously, in a setting that
Is safe.
Safe, exactly, that you can, and that's why there's all these. When you first do EMDR, at least from my experience, is that you always have these kind of safety, like you go through all the visual aspect of the event. What was the emotion you felt? What is the negative thought that you feel when you see this? What's the intensity? Obviously, they asked that. What is the intensity level? How does it feel? Not how you felt then, but how you feel now looking at this event. And then what body sensation do you feel when you see this?
Exactly.
So all this together. And for me, after I did it, and it's like you don't notice it at first, it just feels lighter. I just started feeling lighter. So I still feel the pain. Like we mentioned this, a very brief summary of my suicide attempt. I still feel the pain, but it's dulled. It's not like at 4 or 5 disruptive. It's usually at maybe a 1 or 2. I still feel it, but it's not so disruptive. I'm able to talk about without exhibiting or like having these intense emotions. So like having lost someone from suicide, close, same thing. You go through that whole thing. At least from my experience, it has been helpful. But I've been doing therapy for so long, and you learn. You slowly learn to look towards the mirror and not away from it in essence. And I think that's at least for me how I interpret what the work has been. It's not easy. It's the times when you kind of I don't always like going to therapy. I like my therapist, but I know there's it's work.
Oh, yeah.
It's not
sometimes it's if you're going to your therapist and you're having fun, you're probably not doing the work.
yeah. I prepare I told my wife, therapy tomorrow. Like not really looking forward to it, but it is the acceptance, and also I remember that is part of the process, even if I don't feel it, or I might I think that is part of the healing, the whole journey of, it's not going to be pretty. It never was supposed to be convenient. Mental health is inconvenient. And I feel it's weird when we're kind of saying all these, that's what I worry about, how they pitch whatever new, like what you guys are trying to do, but more about, are you worth the time to heal? And like, we don't say that enough. Like, time is such a commodity that we just throw away. We talk about, when we talk about self-respect or self-worth, we never really talk about time so much. Everything's so fast. But I feel like if we are able to,
well, I do think if you haven't, this is my theory.
mhm,
I know from me, if you haven't experienced the sensation of healing something,
mhm,
I think it can be very easy to say, I absolutely don't have time for this.
I see.
Because if you haven't experienced the speed of EMDR, if you haven't experienced the speed of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, 3 of which are on FDA's breakthrough therapy designation for fast tracking for depression, PTSD, anxiety. If you haven't, I still remember not knowing, because there really wasn't any information around. I still remember coming out of my first journey with my 2 doctors, feeling very disappointed because I didn't feel any different. I was like, this
Yeah.
didn't work. Great. Another thing that didn't work. Within a half an hour, I had perspective shifting. I understood some childhood memories from my adult perspective, and there were aha moments.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized, wait, this healing journey can actually be worth it. It's going to be worth spending the time because this actually worked for me. So I think the challenge for a lot of folks, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths, this was my experience.
Mm.
The challenge was, okay, I'm going to therapy. Nothing's getting better. This is a waste of my time. This is a waste of my money. I'm not seeing any progress. And when I went to this particular modality that worked beautifully for my physicality and my particular diagnosis, I could see progress. And that's what motivated me to keep going. So I
Mhm.
wish there was a way. It's almost like everybody should be introduced to some sort of mental health healing, maybe when we're younger, so we can actually understand that it is worth doing because it can work depending on the modality you choose. But I'm going to tell you right now, before my late 40s, I didn't believe in therapy. It
Mhm.
was not worth the time. It didn't work, all the different excuses. So I can totally see where people are coming from. I think they need to see some results
Mm.
to really
Yes.
believe it can happen.
And I also think they need, obviously, just honesty. One of the things I feel, if you're working in this field in any capacity, you have to be honest. One thing is, you have to give bad news. You cannot go around it. If I'm working with someone, I'm trying to get them something. The trust factor, especially in mental health, is big. If the
Sure.
person doesn't trust you, so sometimes, unfortunately, maybe what I'm trying to help them with doesn't work out. So I feel trust is built by being intentional. I remember just so many times we mentioned before, Carl Jung, loneliness. That's really a big thing. Is really not feeling that what's important to you is not heard. So like, if you're just there, especially not trying to say this as a audience, but being there and being, at least for me, I feel a sense of responsibility. So if I don't see that it's if the person says it's not working, it's not me questioning if the person's really going through it, but also being led by that individual. So I for one, I feel it's a responsibility for the trust, the emphasis on how we connect in these kind of
Yeah.
settings to be more
In
intentionally done. Yeah. So
in the psychedelic world, that's
mhm.
called set and setting.
Okay.
So the two components, the two foundational components to having a therapeutic experience are mindset. Have you prepared? Do you know what you're working on? The medicine's going to take you where the medicine needs to go. You usually know, if you're in that situation, that I'm working on fear, I'm working on my suicidal tendencies, I'm working on hating myself. That's your mindset. The other half Like if you read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, he talks about set and setting. The setting is who are you with, the trust that you've built up with that person, the environment. Is it a safe environment? Is it clean? Are there facilities? Is there going to be music? Is there going to be loud noise? Are there going to be people walking in? And of course, whatever medicine you're using and the dosage. So what you just said about establishing trust, one of the reasons why people have some horrendous stereotypes around psychedelics is that they did them recreationally in a place that was not, the settings were not good. Or
Yeah.
they took something else, or they're with people who just abandoned them or whatever. Like if the setting is not solid, the probability for a really unpleasant psychedelic experience exists. So with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, regardless of the medicine, the mindset and the setting are the basic foundations from which everything else is built.
Yeah, and I feel I feel that that's just I just wish that was more emphasized. Whatever someone chooses
In regular therapy.
Yeah, in regular therapy, in regular, just in everyday life. A lot of times, sometimes my topic is not so heavy with suicide. We have like maybe talking about the community. How do you build community? And a lot of people may say, "Oh, I don't have time." Like remember the time thing about I don't have time to help. I'm like, well, next time you get bad. Next time a waiter gets your order wrong, be nice to them. Be kind to them. Don't sit out there and start barking at them. So there's little things that we can do to just respect others' times. If especially when we're thinking about, because when we're thinking about communicating well, because problem with mental health and substance use and all these, it really does get a little bit more clear what the needs are when the communication is solid, when the transparency and trust is there.
Oh, absolutely.
And if there's not there, it just gets harder because we're guessing a lot and we're trying to encourage the person to feel safe enough. And I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we went on a lot of tangents, but I am encouraged. I just want to commend you for what you're doing, going out there and sharing something that may be unpopular, but at the same time, I think it's necessary that we continue to push forward because people are still struggling there. They still don't know what they still feel helpless. They still don't think that there's anything there for them. Why rob them of the opportunity to discover this for them? So I think knowledge and finding out what works for you is definitely the step in the right direction. So I want to ask you as we kind of wrap up, I know kind of skipped over, but any final thoughts? I know we really talked about, I think a great portion that doesn't really get talked about enough, but thinking about suicide, World Suicide Day, and also just Recovery Month, anything that we haven't covered or anything you want to actually share more on, the floor is yours.
Well, I think what's important, suicidal thoughts can come from, a depression diagnosis, an anxiety diagnosis, a PTSD diagnosis, probably 5 or 10 other ones that I'm not even listing at the moment. And so a behavior like suicide can have a myriad of foundational issues. When I talk about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, my experience obviously for healing PTSD was MDMA. What I think is important for people to understand, especially how you just talked about options, is that do an internet search about FDA breakthrough therapies with psychedelics, because different psychedelics are being researched very specifically for depression, anxiety, PTSD. There are pharmaceutical companies that are testing like crazy. The FDA delaying last August kind of sent shockwaves through the system because everyone kind of knows you need to have the therapy component with the psychedelic, and yet the FDA doesn't approve therapy, and how are we going to approve this new kind of modality and things of that sort. With all of that said, the research into these different compounds has not stopped. And the basic thinking is that once one gets approved, by our FDA, other companies are going to follow the same protocol to continue to get the other substances approved. So I see, and I hope I'm right, I see the mental health landscape in terms of choices expanding within the next 5 years. I mean, they're already expanding in other countries, Australia very specifically with MDMA therapy. Canada can offer MDMA therapy legally through a specific process. Germany just allowed the idea of psilocybin for end of life, an end of life kind of program. So these things are happening. And so I strongly encourage people to do some internet searching. They can do, and I'm not talking like, oh, you're on Reddit. I mean like pharmaceutical companies, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Ohio State, I believe, is doing some cool stuff. Washington is doing some cool stuff. You know, Oregon and Colorado have already decriminalized psilocybin. Lots of centers are opening up. So this is an emerging modality. Lots of research to keep doing. Clinicaltrials.gov has a myriad of the actual clinical trials. You can, and if you're like, I don't want to do this underground, I really want to be part of a clinical trial right now, do a Google alert for clinical trial, your diagnosis, and because pharmaceutical companies, they kind of list their the way that they get people. Why is that word not coming to me? They kind of put their clinical trial, hey, we need people in this clinical trial. They put them on their websites. So how are you going to know who the people are? So a Google alert is really good. Clinicaltrials.gov is really good. And I just try to continue to tell my story that there is hope coming forward for people who are physically able to take these psychedelics. There's absolutely a screening process. There's absolutely a therapeutic process. And if you get nothing else from this conversation, if you are suicidal, if you are in a crisis, that is not the time to do a psychedelic on your own, on your couch. Absolutely not. You go the traditional route, you get yourself in therapy, you get yourself stabilized, and then you consider it. Because psychedelics used incorrectly can amplify. So when you're in crisis, get yourself some help the traditional way. And I think that echoes what you said earlier on. So I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you for letting me share that.
And just like the World Suicide theme is great, hope through action. I think action could just be like you're describing, just going out there, finding what's out there. Finding what ways, if you are struggling and it hasn't worked, don't be the mayor of nothing. Find the courage to find what will work for you. Yeah. Do it responsibly.
Safely.
Ask for help safely, of course. And also just know that even though it may be quicker, it's still going to be work. It's still going to be something that you have to work through. And also, like Recovery Month, we briefly talked about restoring every aspect of your life. So, like, we're talking about therapies that will help, like these new therapies that may be very helpful, and we're waiting on the results on them. But also, think about other things that you can improve. And this is something I always segue of when it comes to coping skills. At least for me, I'm always a creative one. I think creativity is one of the best coping skills that I can really dive into, because the breathing, grounding techniques are great but creativity it reminds myself of me. So I feel for me that really helps me through some of those long hours, those long days, and I just need cathartically to get balanced. I need to get back to it never was supposed to be easy, but am I worth healing? Yes. And I could say that. Am I worth is it worth the time? Is it time going to take? Is it going to be hard at times? Yeah. It's going to, in the military, braces suck. I was in the Air Force in 2000, 2004. And it was like the chair force. We always make fun of each other. We used to say that the Air Force could color in the lines. Army and the Navy can, kind of, and we just hope the Marines don't eat the crayons. That's what we used to say in the, in the past. But with all fairness, it's take care of you. Don't, I learned this one lesson. It's kind of odd. People don't have to understand what I went through at all, because they won't. But doesn't mean they can't support me. It doesn't mean they can't be supportive of me. So like the over explaining, not as necessary. I let that go, but I know I'm surrounded by people that I've learned to trust, and that provide that safety net. So I would say when it comes to all aspect, that includes your environment. Be around people that will be happy if good things happen to you, not, that would also check up on you. And this stuff will take time, but at the same time, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, Jill, and just sharing your insight. I know we kind of went all over the place, but I like it that way. It's kind of chaotic, but I like that we just are talking what is passionate about giving the people know that there's hope, even though there's things out there, there's things they can do, there's steps they can take. And thank you so much for coming on, taking the time.
Thank you so much.
I just want to share with those who are listening, ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. Leaving with this last quote from Wayne Dyer. It says, people who want the most approval get the least, and people who need approval the least get the most. So don't be that person. Don't be that people pleaser. Take care of you today.